You're listening to the Spark Your Light podcast, where my mission is to help you create a life that sparks the light inside of you. And this is episode number 283, Build Your Anxiety Healing Toolkit with Alison Seponara. We have a very special guest in the house. Alison is a licensed therapist and an anxiety healer. And we have her lovely books, The Anxiety Healer's Guide, which I read and I'm going to tell you all about. And she also has this amazing complimentary book for clinicians. So if you are a therapist, this is a really great resource to work through with your clients. So we're going to dive into all things anxiety. Welcome to the show, Alison.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. So Alison and I have known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
Since I started my business, and we were in the same networking group many years ago.
Definitely before COVID.
Yeah, I think it was 2018. God. So it's been a lot of years.
Yeah, it has.
And it's really cool because we've seen each other bloom and blossom.
I know. It's been awesome.
And I can't wait to tell you all about Alison's journey. And I have so many good questions to ask as follow-ups to things from your book and also just things I know about you and your journey. Yeah. So I'd like to start with your story because in the introduction to your book, you talk about how, as a child, you had various anxiety symptoms that I assume you didn't even know were anxiety. And I think so many people experience that in their lives. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I always like to start with telling people that a lot of people ask me about my journey being a psychologist or a therapist. And I start by telling them that I was voted most likely to be a therapist in 8th grade in the superlatives in 8th grade. I mean, think about. And I remember back then thinking, what? Like a therapist? Kind of what's that? I don't know, all this stuff. So I guess from back in the day, people knew that I was kind of destined to be a healer and help other people kind of work on their best selves. And I was a good listener and people came to me with like problems and all that. And so in that aspect, this has been the most sure thing I've ever done with my life was to become a psychologist and become someone who specializes in anxiety. But when it comes to navigating through the field of psychology and going and getting your master's and all that, it's kind of hard to know what specialty you kind of fit into. And I think because I have struggled with anxiety my whole life, which I'll get into, it kind of just came naturally to me to really focus on anxiety disorders and also depression. They're very connected, and kind of just help people through that journey of healing their anxiety and understanding it more too, and helping regulate their nervous system and just learning a lot about that. But as a kid, honestly, with my own anxiety, so when it comes to anxiety with children, a lot of it manifests behaviorally and also physically. So I was the kid who was always in the nurse. I had stomach aches all the time when I was a kid. And so if you're watching this or listening to this and you have children and they talk about having tummy aches, of course, they could be sick for real, but if it becomes a pattern in school maybe, and they are at the nurse a lot or something, I would just kind of pay attention to that and I don't know, just maybe talk to maybe someone in the school or your child or a therapist just about what other might be going on, because it really manifests physically for a lot of children. And so for me, I had stomach aches all the time, and that still manifests for me as an adult. I still get stomach aches when I get nervous and when I get scared. And there's a physiological reason for this. The mind and the gut are very connected. So I think I would say 75 to 90% of our serotonin, which is our happy chemical in our brain, is produced in the gut. So if our gut's not happy, our brain's not happy. If our brain's not happy, then our gut's not happy. So there's very much a connection there, which makes sense why there's a lot of people that experience stomach aches along with anxiety at the same time. So that's kind of, I just remember always being in the nurse, back when I was growing up, therapy wasn't talked about as much as it was now. It sort of was something that people looked down on, to be honest. And my mom was a therapist too, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. And she worked in schools. She worked as a school counselor for a little while. And then she worked as a therapist in private practice, kind of very similar to my journey, because I was a school counselor for a little while too. But even that was kind of later in life. As I got older, she went back to school for that. She was a teacher before that. So I think maybe if she knew a little bit more, she would have been more inclined, or my mom and dad, to put me and get me some support. But back then it wasn't really talked about. And like, you didn't really know who to go see for this. You just went to your doctor, right? You went to your primary doctor. And so I never really, I think to myself how great it would have been for me as a child to get some type of counseling or therapy. I think I would have like thrived with it and really, really helped me. But I'll leave that story for later in the episode if you want, about how I kind of started realizing that I needed some support with it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We want to hear.
Yeah.
Before we get into it, I want to address this concept that you talk a lot about in the book of, anxiety manifests as physical symptoms. And I think you were talking about kids, and then you said, even as an adult, I get it. And I think a lot of adults, myself included, have had experiences where we don't even realize it's anxiety. At least for me, like I realize it looking back. But like, for example, when I studied abroad for a whole semester, I was away for 4 months, my stomach started hurting, and like called the doctor. And I was in Italy, and so we had like a house call doctor that came to the house, and he literally like felt around my stomach. This makes me laugh because I feel like it's the difference between like medicine in America and medicine in Europe. And
totally.
He was like, too much gluten. And it made sense to me. Like, okay, well, I live in this like villa, and we eat pasta for lunch and dinner. And so I literally went gluten-free. And I like stopped eating while I was in Italy. So the cooks in the house we lived in, it was like a school program. So it was like a schoolhouse.
Yeah.
They made me like rice or risotto for dinner. And I think it helped a little bit, probably a little bit of placebo. But when I went home, no problems with gluten. And, now years later, having built my own anxiety healing toolkit and recognizing that I do sometimes struggle with anxiety, that I was 100% anxious, or what would be known as homesick, which is probably just a form of anxiety. But as I feel like even as adults, we don't always recognize it in the moment. And so one of the things I love that you do in the book, and maybe you can share with us a little bit here, is just like some of the physical symptoms that people might experience and not even realize that it's anxiety.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a great example of how it does manifest. So physically, a lot of times people can feel those things and see those things initially, right? They're not really that equipped to tap into the cognitive part of it, right? And so the physical piece just happens so suddenly sometimes. It creates a pattern of this sometimes. And so when something physical happens to your body, what's your first inclination of doing? Like to do? It's to go see a doctor to stop whatever physically is going on, right? That's just kind of natural for anyone to do. I'm feeling something physical, something going on. What doctor do I need to see?
Right.
And so sometimes it actually takes, the best thing that you can do initially is if you do start having anything physical, I always say, go and see a doctor, rule things out. It's good that you did that with your stomach. Like so some of the symptoms that are very connected to anxiety are dizziness. A lot of people sweat, like I said, upset stomach, shortness of breath, heart palpitations. The heart palpitation can feel the scariest for a lot of people because it mimics the feeling of a heart attack. It could. Some people that have never had a heart attack think that it mimics that, but it's not necessarily as what a heart attack really feels like. But people it's really scary. They're very real. The physical symptoms are very, very real. So our brain is a very, very, very smart muscle, right? It creates everything that we do. It basically makes our behaviors. I mean, our brain basically does everything, right? It's kind of like how we describe it is how a computer has like a hard drive, right? That's kind of like our brain for our body.
Yeah.
So if something physically is happening, go to the doctor, rule a lot of things out. If you take all the tests and you do, and this is hard for people with health anxiety too, right? Because any little sensation can kind of create the spiral in your brain. But once you rule everything out, and a lot of doctors these days now, all specialists, they know about anxiety, and they will say to you, sounds like maybe you have a little bit of anxiety, but then maybe sometimes they'll give you a card or something to go see a specialist, a therapist or something, but really, then what do you do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's hard to know where to go from there. And unfortunately, the mental health system in the US is becoming more progressive, and there is more money going into it. People are having conversations more about all of this stuff, which is amazing. But we're still not really there yet.
Yeah.
So I think just being able to understand that, anxiety really is physical, but it is also mental. It's cognitive. There's a cognitive piece to this. And that's probably when it comes to like creating your healing toolkit, and really creating the change of learning how to rewire the way you think about things, and learning how feelings are feelings, and connecting all of that. I'm a cognitive behavioral specialist, so I'm going to talk a lot about the way our brain thinks versus feels and all of that. But yeah, it's just knowing that you might feel these physical symptoms when you understand that it's anxiety, but that you're not necessarily in danger because that's happening to you.
I love that. I feel like I have to sneeze. That's why I've been making a funny
God
face.
God bless you.
But I have calmed it. I love that so much. There are so many things I want to come back to. I'm going to try to remember everything and circle everything back. I want to go back a little bit. You talked about the gut and the brain connection.
Yeah.
And one thing I love about you is that you do all this yourself. So in the book, you talk about what your own anxiety healing toolkit is. So the book is all about creating your own toolkit. And that's what the goal of this episode is, to kind of give you some resources and idea of a place to start with your toolkit. So I'm curious, have you tried different gut health, nutrition focused, and have you found that to be helpful? I don't know much about this, and I'm very curious.
Totally. Well, so you mentioned gluten, right?
Yeah.
And, I'm not a medical doctor that works primarily on, microbiome or anything like that. I'm not. I've researched my own, information about it, and I've talked to a nutritionist, I've talked to a dietitian, I've talked to integrative doctors. Yes, I have been diagnosed with IBS, with diarrhea. Yeah. And such a fun topic to talk about with people.
And you also mentioned in the book that is linked to anxiety.
Yeah. IBS-D is diarrhea. IBS-C is with constipation.
Okay.
And it's really just the way that your stomach and your microbiome handles the stress and life adversity. So whichever way it happens, you either feel like you have to go a lot or you just can't. And so when I was diagnosed with that, I was having, and this isn't all just anxiety related,
right.
It's connected.
Right.
But I also struggle with GERD, which is like acid reflux. Yeah. So that's also something that becomes inflamed the more anxious you get and the more stressed you get. So, because there's a lot of things that happen in your body when anxiety happens with your muscles, right? They constrict and you get tense. And so a lot of times that other physical symptom that's really scary is that the throat can get really tense, right? So you can't feel like you get a full breath of air, and that can feel scary. So I had GERD, and that was happening where I just felt like my throat was closing. I had a really horrible experience when I lived in Center City, Philadelphia, where a piece of food went down wrong, and I thought I was choking, but I wasn't because I was breathing. But I literally had a panic attack at that moment. And so I was living alone at the time. Well, I was living with a roommate, but I was alone at that time. But I lived in a high rise, so I was knocking on people's doors. I was banging on people's doors and thinking I was choking and I was dying. And I just remember I got down to the lobby and was telling people I was choking. Some of this actually was pretty traumatic for me. I'm like trying to remember what even happened because it was, I sort of don't remember every single thing because it was really scary for me. But I remember just going over to a couple people and there was a doctor in the lobby and he was just like, okay, you're okay. And he's like put his hand on my back and he asked me, can you breathe? And I looked at him and I said, yes. And he's like, well, you're not choking if you can breathe. Yeah. And I said, oh. And it's so crazy. My mind just registered, oh, I am breathing. And that happens so much when you have that loss of breath or, right, those physical symptoms, especially with the breath, that can really create a state of fear and danger in your mind. Your mind is kind of thinking like, I can't breathe, I'm dying. That's like a really big, scary thought for a lot of people when they have panic attacks and the physical symptoms happen. But so that was really scary. And then that connected to my stomach stuff too, because after that, I went to the doctor after a couple days. The thing, by the way, I had food stuck in my throat, and that happens when you have GERD, and it eventually went down like an hour later. It was just stuck. So it's an uncomfortable sensation, and it's happened a couple times since then, but I don't panic about it anymore because I know I'm breathing and I know it'll go down at some point. But I also eat differently now. So all that nutrition stuff, all the gluten stuff, it's all inflammatory. And so anything that inflames your stomach is going to inflame a lot of your system, and that's just not going to be good for the brain.
Yeah.
So your brain's not going to be thinking in a rational, clearer way either, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. And it reminds me of Dr. Amen's book. Have you ever read it? The one with the blue cover?
I love him. No, I didn't. I have it. Yes, I did read it.
And for everyone listening, they're like, we have no idea what book this is. And I can't really tell you the name because I don't remember it. But I did read it. And just look up Dr. Amen. He has many books. He's great.
Yeah.
And he talked a lot about diet and how we can improve anxiety, depression through diet alone. And I found that really fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, he's amazing. He actually reviewed my book and loved it. And he and we've like talked a little bit before and stuff, but he's more of like an integrative psychiatrist, which is amazing because integrative psychiatry is a dime a dozen in our country right now. Like to get to see a psychiatrist, first of all, that doesn't cost like $1,000 versus like a holistic psychiatrist, someone who's integrative. I mean, it's hard, but he's amazing. And he does talk a lot about what I was just saying about how food is medicine. It can be medicine. So there's a lot of food and a lot of liquids that are also inflammatory.
And you talked about in the book how you don't drink caffeine or alcohol or limit. I don't know.
So I don't drink. I haven't drank caffeine in probably 12 years.
Wow.
I had a horrible panic attack when I drank Starbucks coffee one night. And no, never again. Sometimes I do love the taste of coffee. Sometimes I'll have a decaf from Wawa or something, you know. But no, I don't drink soda. I don't drink any type of caffeine. Now, I also don't have children, so I know any mom or dad listening right now or watching is probably like, what, girl? Okay. So if I was a parent, that might change. Who knows? Because I know caffeine saves a lot of parents from, having to do their daily responsibility with their children. So I totally get that. Yeah. But if you can limit it, it can really help. I mean, the effects, caffeine's a stimulant. Yeah. So the effects of it can really mimic anxiety symptoms.
Yeah.
So it's just, if you don't have to I would just get that out of there, right? And then what's the other? Alcohol. No, I do not give up alcohol. But I do.
I don't know why I thought I read that.
I do limit
it.
Alcohol,
that's what
100%. But no, I still like my wine a little bit. But I am very careful about what I drink and how often and what it is specifically for anxiety, but also my reflux. There's just a lot of like stay with some clear things. Like sometimes I'll have just like a clear drink and it'll be nice at like the holidays.
Yeah.
But caffeine also killed my stomach. Like, it made me nauseous. I don't know. It just was bad. So I don't drink as much caffeine either anymore. But I will tell you, creating your healing toolkit is like a lifestyle change.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
So everything we're talking about is so important. People might be like, "Well, get to the point where you tell me like what's in the toolkit. What do I need to do?"
They
it's
are
like
listening, thinking that.
seriously. And it's not. It is, first of all, everyone's anxiety healing toolkit is unique to them. No one's toolkit looks exactly the same, and that's because we all have so many different life experiences.
Yeah.
So someone that's gonna, for me, and I have an example of what my toolkit looks like in my book, because at any given time, I wrote that the book came out maybe 2 years ago. There's stuff that I've incorporated into my toolkit and maybe kind of like replaced with some of the stuff that's in there because you grow and life happens and experiences happen. So, for me, I would say a support system's huge. So my support system's huge. Journaling is huge for me. Nature is huge for me. Yoga is huge. These are all sort of, and I'm very CBT, like I said before. So action steps to me are huge, and changing environments and really kind of getting outside my comfort zone, right, is huge. So a lot of these things that I take action on is really what helps regulate my nervous system. And a lot of them have been proven scientifically. So we know there's so much research on nature and moving your body and how healing it is, right, for the mind and the body. Yeah. And so and there's a lot, especially when I start feeling dysregulated and I get these physical symptoms. There are also certain techniques that are really incredible for my body. So like progressive muscle relaxation. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of that.
I think that's one of the things you talked about in the book, isn't
I do, yeah.
Is that the like relaxing each muscle down? Yeah.
Or like PMR, they call it, right? And you can find any like videos on YouTube on how to do this. And you basically clench each different section of muscles in your body for 3 seconds while you breathe, and you release it. So you're essentially calling in the tense. So then the way that you release it, it makes it even more what's it called? Like the sensation of when your muscles release. If you actually call in the tense part of the muscles and then release it, the sensation is so calming when you actually release it. So if anyone gets like nauseous or their stomach is a big physical symptom, try PMR.
I'm going to try it.
It saved me during one of my jobs that I had when I was working in schools, and I was really having a hard time with my anxiety when I was working as a school counselor. I would be in like IEP meetings and I would just be doing PMR. No one would even know I was doing it. Wow. I would just be like clenching my hands and releasing them. And I guess if you're watching on the video, you can see this. So like you might clench your fist for 3 seconds and then release it. And then you would go like this with your shoulders and then release it. And then, professionals will show you. I do this with my clients with a script usually, but then there's, you'll like use your face muscles. You'll go like this really tight and then you'll release it. So you'll do all different parts of your body and you'll tense them and release. So progressive muscle relaxation, huge for any physical symptoms you get, can really help just put your body and mind in a more regulated state again.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. So those are just some of the things that I love to get started.
I love it. And the book is filled with like every possible tool. It's like the entire book is a toolkit.
And I'm a holistic practitioner. So there's, if you're someone who really wants to try and work on creating a toolkit that's unique to you and holistically, this is great. I'm a huge advocate for medication too. I am, as long as it's managed and prescribed appropriately.
Right.
But this is like a great guide for that.
Would you say, in your experience, you'd recommend someone start with these things before trying medication, or just curious?
So again, that's case by case basis.
Okay.
So if you're, everything in this book, I would suggest anybody doing everything. Yeah. Like anyone. I don't even care if you don't have anxiety. Everyone in life has some life adversity. It just happens. But everyone's what is it, like the rating scale of how the intensity of their anxiety or the intensity of whatever mental health they struggle with is all going to be different. Some people are more resilient and they can just kind of bounce back. Even those people should be trying these exercises and these strategies. Like I said, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
It really is. And so if you want to create a way for your mind and your body to know how to move through difficult moments and life adversity, whether it's grief. My dad passed 2 years ago, and it was my anxiety like that I had 15 years ago. That was really when I had my first horrible panic attack. It came back because this huge thing happened in my life where I had a death of my father, who was like my emotional support, everything, right? And shook me to my core. And then I had to kind of reinvest in all of this again. Now, I've had my toolkit for 15 years. So it's very easy for me to know what I need now at this point.
Yeah.
I'm really in tune with that. But I was not prepared for the death of my father.
No.
You know, you think you know how you're going to handle things. What I did know is that I needed a lot of the things in my toolkit that maybe I hadn't tapped into in a while. Or I needed that 4 to 5 times a week instead of once a week. I was going to therapy twice a week. I went to a grief retreat because I needed to be around people that understood it. I needed to talk about it. I needed to cry about it, even though it was so hard. I needed to practice more yoga than I was used to. I needed to call my friends more. I needed to rest. I needed to do breath work. When I was crying, I would start crying so bad that I would start to feel like I wasn't able to breathe because I was crying so hard. But everything starts with the breath, everything. So if you can really get into a breathwork practice when you're feeling regulated and learning how to breathe from your diaphragm, from your belly and your diaphragm and not like your chest, then you'll know how to do that when you feel like you're getting short of that. So I had to kind of like not relearn that, but just do that times 10, right, during that moment in my life. And that's going to happen. But as long as you can really try and practice what you know works well for you and not just think, oh, I'm going to journal today and tomorrow and then I'm going to be okay. Oh, okay. Maybe I'll try this meditation tomorrow. It's going to be awesome. And then I'll be cured. I'll be good. That's not really the point of healing.
It's habits.
Totally. It is changing the brain and creating habits.
So let's talk a little bit about what you mentioned earlier with the way the brain thinks versus feels. Can you explain that?
Okay, yeah. So I love this part because for me, in my brain, just because of how much, like, of course, my career is being a therapist, right, is learning about feelings and thoughts and reading about it and practicing it. So to me, it's just like, oh, of course, but I have to ground myself sometimes and remember, it's really hard sometimes for people to know the difference between a thought and a feeling.
Yeah.
And that is probably one of the most important things that you can really, really try and train your brain to understand and know. And if you're working with a therapist, that's going to be huge in them educating you on the differences between thoughts and feelings. So a feeling, think about when you hear feeling and emotion, it's very synonymous. Emotions really are feelings. And if you really are having a hard time distinguishing between a thought or a feeling, ask yourself, what is a feeling word right now? Like, what are feeling words? What would you say are feeling words?
Love. Is that a feeling word?
Okay. Love.
Sadness, happiness.
Yeah.
Joy.
Yeah.
Frustration.
Yes. 100% good. Yeah. So feeling words are the words that describe an emotion. So sad, mad, happy. Angry is mad, but angry.
Yeah.
Right? Scared, worried. And anxiety, scared and worried, that's really the basis of anxiety. There's so many other emotions that come along with it, of course, but when someone says, I'm anxious, to me, what they're telling me is I'm really, really scared of something. I'm really, really worried about something.
Yeah.
And so, so being able to really become in tune with how you're feeling at any certain time is going to be huge. A lot of times with my adult clients, I do the same thing with my clients that I see that are children, which is I have them print out, well, I send it to them, and I have this in both books, a whole chart of feeling words. And you guys would be surprised how many feeling words there are. There are like...
I was having trouble coming up with them.
So many feeling words.
Yeah.
Well, and so you'll see in the book that it's really hard to come up with them. So many people, I mean, of course, when we're younger, we know sad, mad, happy, excited, right? Scared. Those are the ones we kind of learn as kids.
Yeah.
But even then, it's still hard to come up with them so I want you to start getting comfortable with saying, I feel scared. I feel worried. I feel excited. I feel sad. Right. And that can really help you understand a little bit more. It gives you data for yourself, right, of what you're going through. And then what you can ask yourself is, I feel sad because I'm thinking this.
Because thoughts create feelings.
Yes. So it could be, I feel sad because I'm thinking about how I didn't get to say goodbye to my dad when he died. Or I'm feeling really scared right now because my stomach hurts and I hate throwing up, and I'm scared I'm going to throw up, and I really, really hate that feeling. And so I'm really scared right now because I'm thinking about throwing up. And so that thought right there is creating this spiral of fear in my brain, which makes my brain and my body think that I'm in danger. Yeah. But you're really not in danger, right? There's just something. And that's why it's really hard for people with phobias. Exposure therapy is great. So if you recognize that maybe there's some phobias that you have, for whoever listening, something called exposure and response prevention is wonderful therapy. It's ERP, and would look for an ERP specialist. Someone with OCD also is wonderful. Treatment is ERP. Also, cognitive behavioral therapy, is the end all be all of treatment as far as I'm concerned, because I love it so much, and it's what literally helps me every single day. But
can you explain what it is for people who don't know?
Yeah. So cognitive behavioral therapy, this is a great segue because it really looks at our brain and the way that we think and how our thoughts actually influence our feelings, and how there's certain buzzword triggers, right? Or antecedents, which are situations or events that happen, and they create certain thoughts in our brain, and then they create certain feelings because of those thoughts. So, for example, there could be two people who go into a party. Let's just put that example out there. One person has severe social anxiety, and the things going through her brain are, everyone's going to look at me, everyone's going to laugh at me, I'm going to say something stupid, I'm going to look like such an idiot when I walk in there, I don't even know what to wear, I look so stupid, okay? And then another person's going into the party and feels kind of nervous, but they're just, thinking to themselves, okay, this is going to be kind of nerve-wracking. I don't know anybody, but maybe I'll just go say hi. And, if anyone's talking, and I'm sure they're probably just talking about something else, they're probably not even talking about me. And maybe I'll make a new friend. Who knows? But I think I'll be okay going in there. And if I really am not having a good time, I'll just leave. Yeah. See how the difference of thinking there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So two people could go into the same exact situation and their brains just are in two different. So cognitive behavioral therapy really kind of unravels that in somebody's brain, and we look at the thoughts that they have that are really contributing to their avoidance behaviors and what creates this fear in whatever environment it is, or maybe it's people they're around, or maybe it does connect to some trauma too. That's very common. And we kind of work with those thoughts and we help challenge the thoughts, because a lot of the thoughts that they're having are distorted, right? They're kind of errored, and not because it's their fault. It's just their brain's way of protecting them when they feel scared.
So I have a couple follow-up questions.
Yeah.
First question, do those feelings then create action? So like if a person's not happy with the way they're behaving, let's say they say something that they regret, would the way to work on that, or one way to work on it, be to unravel and go backwards onto that initial thought, if that makes sense?
So yes.
I can give you an example.
Yeah, go ahead.
So today, this morning, when I'm leaving the house, my mom's babysitting Michael, and I'm trying to get everything ready. You know, when you have a baby and you're trying to make sure the bottles are there and he's eating food, so the lunch. And okay, so I'm trying to get out the door. And my mom goes, "Oh, did you finish addressing all your Christmas cards?" And I said, "Does that look like 100 Christmas cards?" Because there were like 20 there. So obviously, no. And so I was triggered by her asking that question. And there was probably a thought like, I'm so behind. I should have finished the Christmas cards 3 days ago. I'm so overwhelmed. I don't have any time, right? And then I said something mean to my mom, who's helping me and babysitting my son. And it's a great mom. So then I feel terrible. And then I'm like, man, I got to work on that. And it's like this constant awareness of something that's going to trigger you ahead of time. Or I'm just curious, like, because what you're saying about unraveling, like, it totally makes sense.
Yeah. So what's the feeling word that you were feeling when she said that?
Not enough. Like I should be done. I don't know if that's feeling word.
Okay. So you were thinking that I'm not enough. So that was the thought that was going on. Like I'm not doing enough.
Yeah. I guess the feeling word would be like overwhelmed, maybe.
Okay. Overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're overwhelmed because what I can imagine is life for you and having a, baby, who's not even a year old yet, and having a career that's wonderful and doing a lot of the work that goes into all of those hats. And yeah, there's something that you maybe weren't even thinking about that wasn't in the forefront of your mind that was reminded to you from somebody.
Yeah.
And sometimes also it hits differently when it's someone that we care about, like a parent who says things to us. That's where a lot of our core beliefs come from, is when we're younger. And a core belief in CBT is really how we see the world and how we believe the world to be, and what we see for us within the world as well. And a lot of those core beliefs are, they are kind of like really ingrained in our brain between 0 and 7 years old, like the first 7 years of our lives. So which a lot of us don't remember, right? That's why anyone that wants to look up attachment theory, it's so interesting, and they can learn more about like core beliefs and attachment theory and how parents kind of play a role in that. But I would say, so you felt overwhelmed, right? So it's not surprising that you would feel overwhelmed just in a day-to-day basis. And so you hear this comment and automatically you're thinking, great, I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
Right? And so if we were in a session, I'd probably really tap into that belief of how often you feel like you're not doing enough or that I'm not enough with where I am right now. And how can we kind of chip away at that core belief? And what are the thoughts surrounding that core belief? Because the thought in that moment, you might have had also all those other thoughts, right? Like, oh, you think I did like 20 of them. Like, I can't do all of them right now. I've been trying to do them. I'm leaving for work. You're saying this comment to me. Oh, yeah, you're always, there might have been a million different thoughts going on.
But ultimately, it's getting at what are the core beliefs that are causing this triggered behavior, and then chipping away and maybe reforming them.
Yes. So recognizing, first of all, self-awareness is huge. So recognizing when you are starting to get into the pattern of thinking really critical, negative thoughts about yourself or about a situation, right? And also asking yourself, okay, how true is this thought right now? Right? So if your thought in that moment was, I'm never good enough for her, or I'm not doing anything, like I'm not doing everything I need to be doing. Oh my gosh, like oh, and I didn't finish it. I can't believe I didn't. Any of those like critical thoughts about yourself. It's really about kind of being aware of that, knowing, oh my gosh, I'm saying this again, and asking yourself, okay, how true is this statement? Right? So how true would the statement be for you? So finish this. In that moment, I'm feeling really overwhelmed because I'm thinking blank.
I'm thinking that there's just not enough time in the day to do all the things I want to do.
Yeah. So there's not enough time in the day. And if there was, what would that mean for you? If you had all the time in the day, then what would that mean about you?
That I was like perfect because I could like do everything, and like the laundry would be put away and the house would be clean and all my work would be done. I would be like just it's perfect. I'd be happy when Richie came home. I'd be like, hey, how's your day? My day was great.
So you just mentioned the next buzzword in my ear, which is perfect.
Yeah.
Right. And so perfectionism is huge when it comes to anxiety disorders, especially high functioning anxiety. And a lot of people and a lot of the clients that I treat, myself included, I've learned a lot about perfectionism and how this core belief of not feeling like you're enough really correlates to this perfectionistic type of personality.
Which is not surprised. Is perfectionism linked to being type A?
Totally. 1000%. Yes.
Because I was just talking about on another episode how I like my closets to be perfectly organized.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's also part of when you think of the anxious brain, we like predictability, right? As someone who is an anxious person, I like to know what's going to happen next. But the world doesn't go like that.
Yeah.
Right? And you don't necessarily know what's going to happen a minute from now or, hour from now or like a month from now. You just don't. And you have to be comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And that's why everyone always says, try and live in the moment and be present. Okay, everyone, and the amount of times that I'm sure people are kind of rolling their eyes right now because I am too. It's so easy to say, let's train your brain to be mindful and present. Right.
And that's something you teach about how to do it with real exercises.
I do. And that's a huge piece of this and we talk about habit, how to train your brain, doing specific exercises that helps train your brain to know that some of those intrusive or, critical, any of those thoughts that create those feelings of fear and worry, and how to kind of acknowledge they're there. And remember, we can't just take thoughts out of our brain, right? They're there.
Yeah.
And to how to make them a little quieter and know that they're there and that it's okay that they're there, but we don't need to listen to them all the time, and that maybe we can tap into our logical part of our brain and our loving part of our brain. Self-compassion is huge, right? So for that example for you, I would probably have you kind of look into a little bit more further of the perfectionism, but then I'd ask you to think about what you would say to a friend who was in that situation. How would you support a friend who was thinking like that about themselves?
Do you want me to answer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if I had a friend who was feeling like there wasn't enough time in the day and they need to be perfect, I would ask them what's most important to them. And they would probably say like, being able to be a mom and spend time with my baby and, do the work that is fulfilling to me and whatever, finish your list. And then I would say to them, was having the laundry put away in your drawers and perfectly folded one of those things? And, I saw an Instagram reel that I actually really loved. And it said, like, your baby doesn't care if you're, of course, my whole algorithm is like, new moms. But it's like your baby doesn't care if, like, the house is a mess and you haven't showered in 3 days. And
Totally.
Your baby just cares that you're loving them. Mm-hmm. And that really resonated. So I think I would bring a friend back to those things.
And how do you usually support a friend or someone you love who is really overwhelmed, just feeling overwhelmed?
I listen.
Yeah.
And I offer to help them usually. I don't, maybe that's probably not, I don't
no,
know.
but you offer support.
Yeah.
Right? You just offer support in a loving way.
Yeah.
Sometimes people don't need anything but just someone to listen, or sometimes they just need to say, like, it's okay. Like, you're doing a great job.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're doing amazing.
Yeah.
And you're doing the best that you can. Right? And also, perfection is an illusion. It does not exist. Right? So you need to say those things to yourself.
Yeah.
And so I love that exercise too. Like, what would you say to a loved one? Because it really detaches yourself from like the anxious, little anxious bully that's in there, right? That's not really you. Yeah. That's just like, it still needs compassion though. So really kind of tapping into what's a compassionate thing I can say to myself right now. I'm really overwhelmed. And maybe it's just like, you know what, Jackie, you are doing a great job. You are a new mom. You have all this stuff going on. And you know what? Maybe you'll never even send those invitations out. And who the F cares? Bye. Sorry, you guys didn't get invitations this year, but I had a great 2 weeks doing nothing. You know, compassion. It's okay.
Yeah. I love it. Such great advice. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have 2 more things. I could talk to you literally all day, but I want to keep this episode somewhat reasonably length.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that I've been working on is a new book, and it relates to some of the concepts in your book. So I kind of just wanted to share with you and hear your thoughts on some kind of, I guess, therapist's perspective. Okay. So it's about hope, and specifically the concept of getting your hopes up, because I don't know if you know this, but Michael was in the hospital for 6 weeks when he was born, and Richie and I had to move into CHOP because he was on a pediatric floor. So we lived there with him. Talk about the like unknown. We didn't know how long we were going to be there for, when we would get to come home, and so it was a really, really dark time. And it was this cycle where basically his doctors would tell us that he had low blood sugar, so he just couldn't keep his blood sugar at a healthy level. And it was very unsafe, because if the blood sugar drops really low, then he could have like seizures and brain damage and things. So there's only one FDA approved medication for what he was diagnosed with, which is called hyperinsulinism. So his pancreas was making too much insulin. And that one medication, they would put him on it, and they would have to wait 5 days for it to take effect and get to a certain like level in his bloodstream. And then they would do a fast overnight where he wasn't given any milk, and they would see if he could keep his blood sugar at a healthy level to sleep through the night. And he would fail. And then they would tell us like, okay, like let's try again with a higher dose. And this was just happening like over and over again. And it was like weeks and weeks, because it was, 5 days. So finally, at one point I said to Richie, my spirit like genuinely just can't take it anymore. I can't get my hopes up one more time, because I just feel like so depleted. And so of course Richie goes along with anything I say. So he's like, okay, like let's just like be willing to like accept the worst case scenario. So we literally started like asking the doctors about the worst case scenario, and like kind of like thinking that this would be good for us, like thinking that somehow by like going to the worst case scenario, if we were prepared for it, that we would be better off mentally. And that night he failed the fast again, but I actually felt like the lowest that I have felt in the entire journey. I felt so down, so low. And I realized that it was hope that had got me through each day. It was hope that I was just a little closer to the light at the end of the tunnel, and that we would get through it. And when I was hopeless, I had nothing. There was no point. And I couldn't even show up for my baby. And so in the book, you talk about the worst case scenario and how our brains like to go there. I'm just curious what you think about hope and how it might impact our mental health.
Well, first of all, I'm so sorry that you guys had to go through that. I honestly did not know the depths of that. So thank you for sharing that with me. He's doing okay.
He's doing great.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. Yay.
We're very lucky.
So with hope, honestly, I mean, just completely from personal experience and from what you just said. And hope is always a good thing.
Yeah.
Maybe the best of things. And a good thing never dies.
Yeah.
Do you know what that's from? What movie that's from?
No.
Shawshank Redemption.
I've never seen it.
It's such a good movie. Anyway,
Okay, I'll watch.
But I love that quote. I think Morgan Freeman says it at the end. And really, there's nothing bad about having hope.
You know, in our society, it seems that there's this, I mean, that saying came from somewhere, don't get your hopes up. It's like this push that like optimism is bad because you're going to have your head in the clouds and then you're going to get smacked with reality. What do you think of that?
I mean, I don't know. I don't like that saying. Don't get your hopes up. I just don't. What is that? How is that helpful?
Yeah.
I think I know people have good intentions by saying don't get your hopes up, because I think what they mean is it might not turn out the way that you want it to turn out.
Right.
Right? But maybe that's a better way of saying it, right? And I teach a lot in my practice about having language that can be more helpful for people to hear and for yourself to hear. So while it might not turn out the way, and you might have to have a really, really difficult time, that you still will survive.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing with mental health and anxiety or life adversity, grief also, is that I think people listening that have gone through really severe panic attacks or really low places. I had a really bad depressive episode years ago. And once you kind of go through some of those things, you're almost like, I survived this.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I can. And that comes with age too, right? You just go through more difficult things as you get older. And you kind of just have to learn how you survive things and what gets you through that.
So is that sort of a form of exposure therapy? Because when you were talking about exposure therapy, I was thinking about the fear of disappointment. Mm-hmm. And that's why a lot of people tell me that they don't want to get their hopes up. And I was wondering if one of the ways that people can get over that fear is just being disappointed.
Totally. Well, I mean, feelings just are, right? So maybe it's allowing themselves to feel a disappointment and not like avoiding it. So avoidance is a huge part of anxiety. We want to avoid these bad sensations. We want to avoid these bad feelings. But part of healing, a huge part of healing, is to learning how to be comfortable with discomfort. And certain feelings are really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And feelings aren't bad. People might say, oh my God, I feel so bad. You know, this feeling is bad. Being scared and worried is a bad feeling. It's not bad or good. They just are.
Yeah.
So they don't feel comfortable though. So somehow getting comfortable, and that takes practice. It takes a lot of vulnerability for some people that aren't used to expressing emotions. There's a lot of adults, a lot of people I work with that were never allowed to express their emotions. Yeah. So how are they supposed to know how to as a 45-year-old or 80-year-old? And they have to learn that on their own, but essentially with support, right? I help a lot of people learn how to have the language of feelings, just like I told you, printing out that feeling list, starting to use feeling words more, starting to understand that when you're having these physical sensations, what feeling do I have right now? Well, I'm feeling really sad and I feel like I want to cry, but I shouldn't cry. And I don't want to cry in front of people, but I really am sad and need to cry. Why not? Just let yourself cry. Okay, but in your brain, you're thinking, well, it's a weakness, right? There's all these other thoughts that are maladaptive that keep this person keep avoiding these things. And it's not. You have to, you can't jump over, any part of your life or any adversity or any sadness. You have to move through all the feelings, and it's not comfortable, but, find a safe space to try and learn how to do that initially. And that's the best thing you can do. If your safe space is therapy, great. If it's your partner, awesome. If it's a supportive friend or, a group or a church or any type of spiritual place or whatever it is, learn how to just really be vulnerable with people and yourself.
Because if we're not vulnerable, Brene Brown teaches us that we can't experience the best parts of life because we can't selectively numb emotions.
I love her.
And you mentioned her work.
I do.
And I know her one book is about emotions, which I haven't read. So maybe the Atlas one, isn't that all about?
Oh, I didn't read that yet.
Well, it sounds like something you would like.
Yeah, I probably would. I think I need to start that.
Heart. I think that's what it's called.
Yes.
I think it's like a dictionary of feelings. From what I could be totally wrong.
My gosh, I'm gonna go put that on my Audible.
I love it. Well, thank you. I wanted to end on this because I thought it would be really full circle. Okay. You mentioned earlier you had an experience where you realized, okay, I need to get help with my anxiety. And I feel like for anyone who pressed play and is still listening, I have no idea how long we've been recording. By the way, it feels like a warp of time.
Yeah, just like, sorry.
No, I love it.
Okay.
I love for those still listening, you obviously are invested in this. And so I always think it's helpful to hear someone else's story and maybe how they started to make a change in their life. Because for those listening, they want to make changes in their lives.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is where I say it started, but really it started way before that. I just didn't know it. And I had a really, really bad panic attack on my 30th birthday. I'm 44 now. And it was a surprise party. And anyone listening that really struggles with anxiety hates surprises. Yeah. Right? Never had one before in my life. There was this whole huge anyway, a lot of things were planned. Had the worst day ever. I spent it in the bathroom. There were people there that were invited that I didn't like anymore, but no one really knew a lot about my life. So it was really a turning point to learning more about just needing, like I needed something needed to change. And before that happened, the panic attacks, I had been having panic attacks. I just didn't know really what they were. Even though I was in school for psychology, I just thought that, I was in my 20s and I was drinking a lot. I was drinking too much. And I wasn't remembering a lot of things. Obviously, alcohol is a depressant, which means that you might feel good when you're doing it, but as you withdraw from it, it creates a lot of anxiety with the chemicals in your body. It creates a lot of anxiety and depression. So I was severely anxious and depressed a lot of my 20s. Like I said, in my youth, I was really anxious. I also think I have a little bit of ADD. Haven't gotten tested for that yet, but I feel like I'm going to at some point. And ADD and ADHD are very connected to anxiety as well. And so as I started getting older and that 30th birthday, and this was 15 years ago at this point, is really when I started my healing journey, I'll say, quote unquote.
Yeah.
I just knew that I needed something. So I found a therapist. I had a couple different therapists throughout my life. I literally, everything that I did was with a therapist. Yes, I talked to them, but everything from this book is literally what I did for myself. So I essentially wrote this book out of a huge folder I had of research I had printed out, of techniques I had practiced, of different types of therapy that I read up on, my journal entries, holistic treatments, my integrative, nutritional information that I did. I mean, it was up until now, really, and up until I wrote this book, I had a huge folder of everything that I had tried on my own. I put my entire life into wanting to learn about the mind and the body other than just psychology.
Yeah.
So a lot of integrative ways to help the mind fix itself and help the body and what you can do. I'm very much action oriented. So I really took the steps. I started, like I said, doing yoga a lot. And I met an amazing community and went to a retreat. I started volunteering and, I got my jobs in schools. And so I started practicing more as a counselor, which was great. I stopped drinking for a long time and really changed my friendships.
Wow.
And so all of that probably was the basis of things. Is a lot more stuff that I worked on too, But to get where I am now, I also worked on forgiveness a lot. There's a lot of people in my life that were still in my heart of like why they didn't like me. I'm someone that likes to be liked. People pleaser.
Yeah.
A lot of people that are anxious are people pleasers as well. It goes along with the perfectionism. I had to let go a lot of that, and I had to work on forgiveness. And then the most important thing that I do still every day is learning how to really love who I am, the way that I am. So self-love, self-compassion. I did a lot of mirror work and a lot of affirmation work. I talk a lot about that in the book too. And that is a real thing. You look in the research of affirmations, it's not just about, saying, I love who I am every day. I mean, there is a method to it that I talk about in the book. And just talking to yourself differently and looking yourself in the mirror and just love. Like you said before, the feeling of love for yourself is huge too.
So good. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks.
So many valuable resources in this episode in the book, and we're so grateful to have you here. And by the way, if you don't know, if you've made it this far, you probably picked up on this, but Alison is very famous. She's not just my friend. She's got like 500,000, maybe more, maybe 1 million. I can't even keep track at this point, followers on social media. So tell us where we can find you. Follow along.
Thank you. I'm not really that famous, but I follow me at The Anxiety Healer on Instagram and on TikTok and on Facebook, theanxietyhealer.com. You can find all of my resources. I have a blog and that has really good resources, free stuff on my website. I also have an online school, the Anxiety Healer Academy, which has a couple different online courses and digital books that you can get for a lot of specific types of treatment, whether it's CBT or health anxiety or social anxiety. And feel free to DM me or send me a message. I answer every single DM within, I would say, maybe like a week.
I didn't know that.
I do. I know.
I thought you just liked me.
I'm a monster. I don't know why, but I am.
That's so kind.
I love connecting with my community. I love connecting. So I do. I try and answer as best as I can. Every single one.
That is so amazing. Wow.
So,
you are such an amazing soul.
Thank you. And then I also have my own podcast, The Anxiety Chicks.
Yes.
So if you guys want to listen to me and my awesome co-host, who's a dietitian, we talk a lot about, she's a holistic dietitian.
I didn't know she was a dietitian.
Yeah. Yeah, she's a registered dietitian.
Combination.
It's awesome. So yeah, we talk about so many different and we talk a lot about our own personal journey. So we just had a woman talk about anxiety and perimenopause the other week. We talked about signs of seasonal anxiety. We've talked about death anxiety. That's a huge one. So just, come check us out. Theanxietyhealer.com has everything. So
love it. Thank you so much for your time. We're so grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone for listening, for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode.